Okay. Good morning, members. Good morning, everyone. Thanks very much for attending this morning. First item on the agenda are apologies for absence.
ACO getting Thomas.
Okay, any more? Okay. Item 2, declarations of interest. Members of the Fire and Rescue Authority are reminded of their personal responsibility to declare both orally and in writing any personal and/or prejudicial interest in respect of the matters contained in this agenda in accordance with the provisions of the Local Government Act 2000, the Fire and Rescue Authority Standing Orders, and Members' Code of Conduct. Are there any declarations of interest? No? Good. Item 3, Chairperson's announcements. I don't have any other than to welcome Simon Barnes, who's our Deputy Chair of Standards Committee. Hello, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Good morning, everybody. Nice to see you.
Okay. Item 4, to receive minutes of the Scrutiny group held on the 28th of November 2022. If anybody can remember that far back. Okay, just to go through them. For accuracy, page 1, page 2, page 3, and page 4. You all happy with those?
I'm happy to move, Chair.
Thank you very much, sir. Okay. Agenda item number 5, reports for decision. This is a report on the responses to the consultation of the strategic themes and objectives for 2023-24. I do believe it's Sarah. Okay.
Yes, morning members. I'm going to present this paper for you today. First of all, I must apologise. There are a couple of highlighted elements on your papers, which were done in preparation, and this report will also be going to the Fire Authority. So with the time to the consultation finishing, there are some amendments to this report that you will see differently when you get the full Fire Authority report at the next meeting. The finalised version of that paper report and the appendix are currently being worked on. Looking at the consultation for the strategic themes and objectives for 23-24. So just to advise members, on an annual basis, we consult on our objectives towards our strategic themes. And the dates in this report at 1.3, it should be the 11th of July 2022. You can see that was the date from last year. At 2.1, the figure was still under review as in the final report, but it has increased from the 227 in the draft appendix. So just to advise members, there is a discrepancy in the numbers there, but due to the closing of the consultation and the date that this report was required, we've got a little disparity there, which will be ironed out for the Fire Authority report. At 2.2, this paragraph will be updated with the final analysis, and 2.3 refers to Appendix 1, which you can see from page 11 of this report. And again, in 2.4, the highlighted date there should read the 13th of February. Moving on to Appendix 1, on pages 12-14, this takes members through the what and the how of our objectives and how they are aligned to our strategic themes as an organisation. And on page 15, this takes us through the survey response evaluation. So just to give you some headline figures, I'm sure members have read this in its totality. We've had 25% more respondents than the previous year. There's been a 45% increase on respondents responding to one or more objectives. One of the challenges we always have with the consultation, particularly when you're asking a series of questions, is the dropout rate for the respondents. So we've had an increase this year of people sticking with us through the consultation. 66% of the people that responded were associated with the service in some shape or form. And we've had increased participation by corporate staff and control firefighters. But what this survey and its results do show is that we need to gain more buy-in into the engagement with our operational firefighters across the different work platforms. And we've also had a 26% increase in responses from the public. As noted, the response rate reduced as the survey progressed through, and there was feedback on the structure and content of the survey, in particular that it wasn't particularly user-friendly and there was a lack of specific measures for outcomes. This feedback will be considered in our evaluation of the consultation process and inform future consultation exercises. Also on page 15, we can see the level of agreement for our proposed objectives for 23-24. I'm obsessed with 22 today, apologies members, I keep saying it wrong. We can see that there's overall agreement with our proposed 23-24 objectives, with 81% of respondents indicating agreement with proposed objectives. This level of agreement is 8% higher than last year, the proportion of responses in agreement for each strategic theme and the supporting objectives increased for 7 out of the 8 areas. It did, however, reduce for the protecting our environment, but that was by 1% from 82 to 81% agreement. I'll accept that for this year. The highest proportion of agreement was recorded for the keeping you safe and the responding to your emergency, and they were 86 and 85% respectively. And these also received the greatest positive increases in agreement from the previous consultations. One thing I will share with members is that there were some very valuable comments in the consultation responses, and we're analysing them as a department, and we will also be reviewing those across the service so that we can build those responses into our future plans and objectives. Happy to take any questions from members at that point.
Dan's got his hand raised.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so I think obviously it's been, most of the main points have been covered really greatly in the report. But my main concern has obviously been a member now for my 6th year. The same issues keep coming up. So even though it's great seeing more people respond to the survey, I think probably the highest we've had in a long time, and the survey responses have been generally more positive, including on valuing our people. But that's still the lowest we have of any of the areas, and still 29% of people responded still had a negative response to that section. And if you link that with very low numbers of firefighter staff responding to the survey, I think this still shows, at least with large sections of the staff, we have a real issue with engaging with them. And I know we say we will do better each year. I just want to see potentially what steps are going to be taken to come back to this committee before the next survey comes out, so we have a chance to see how we're going to engage with our staff better and scrutinise how we're going to do that.
Absolutely fair point there, Dan. So what we can do is that we could bring back to scrutiny what we're going to do differently this year through our engagement strategy. If Chair's happy for us to bring that paper forward, we could bring forward a paper about the strategy, about how we're going to attempt to engage more effectively with those staff members. Obviously, at the moment with industrial action, there's an underlying current of discontent. But we will definitely bring back a strategy group, so that you can scrutinise our efforts.
Something I was going to pick up on, I'm glad Dan did actually. You know, as you said, 29% either neither agree, somewhat disagree, or strongly disagree. That's quite a chunk. Have we any indication why?
So,
initial indication from?
Yeah, initial indications are that there is there's still some discontent over the job evaluation process and the destabilising effect that had across particularly corporate areas of staff, because that did impact on corporate staff members. So we think that there's that. We also think there's external environmental reasons and issues such as the cost of living, you know, the changes and the impacts that COVID has had with all of us. So I think there's a number of varied reasons, some of which we will have control over and we can influence, but there will be a number that we can't.
Okay, you're happy with that, Dan?
I am, yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Kate, you indicated to speak.
Thank you. Yeah, this made for really interesting reading. Thank you for the level of detail. And I do think you have identified the fact that we don't have such great engagement from particular operational staff, although other areas as well. So it feels to me on a number of different levels that engagement strategy is becoming increasingly important, and surveys can be very useful, but how the dialogue is taking place and who it takes place with is very important. It's, you know, and that is taken to where people are, to where operational staff are, and I'd be more than happy to support with a conversation offline around some thoughts and ideas around that. Two things that I just wanted to flag. One, with my kind of biodiversity sustainability champion hat on for the authority, and that is, it would be good to see protecting and enhancing our environment, and I know that you're doing really good stuff around biodiversity, so it would be good to see that reflected in there, as it's a key aspect of Resilient Wales, to reflect that, you know, the how you are doing some of this now. And the other critical thing at the moment, I think, under our people, there's a really crucial review that is taking place, that the organisation, you know, is taking a robust response to recent events, and it feels really important that that is reflected against valuing our people as one of the, you know, to meet these objectives. Our priorities in 23-24 will include, I think it would be really powerful to see that review included as a line there, because it's really important for some of this stuff to be not just implicit but explicit, where you've got significant pieces of work to improve things. Those should absolutely be reflected, so we can keep coming back to and ensuring that they are having the effect that they need to have. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, Councillor Carr. When we publish our 4-year update to our strategic plan, we will be looking at what we're doing in the year coming up. And I can confirm that the culture review will be within that document, and it will be within all of our planning elements within the business management system as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, no, any other questions? We've got none in the room. Anyone else? Okay, all right. The recommendations are that we review the consultation evaluation and that we approve the strategic themes and objectives detailed in Appendix 1. Are we all happy with that? Yep.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much for the report. Next item is item agenda number 6, review of policies and procedures. Andrew Jones.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
You there? Sorry.
Yes, absolutely.
Out my peripheral view. Karen.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. Good morning, everyone. And thank you for the opportunity of coming in to discuss with you where we are in terms of a review of policies and procedures. This is very much a work in progress for the organisation, making best use of the technology available to us. Just a brief overview. Certainly the first the first paragraph in my report, introducing why we have policies and procedures. I don't want to insult your intelligence by describing why we need policies and procedures in any particular organisation. It's quite clear, and I highlight that in the initial introduction. In terms of the scope of our policies and procedures in the service, we've got 9 overarching policies. Within those, there are a total of 377 procedures, which in itself sounds quite a high figure, but I'll come on to that a little later. But in looking at the organisation, just the departments and the working practices, appliances and equipment, HR, finance, training, operational risk management, operations, fleet, etc. It goes on, so it's quite easy to get to the level of documentation that we have, but we are looking at making inroads there, and I'll come on to that a little later. I've asked Gemma to come in, my HR colleague here. Primarily, Gemma is the specialist in terms of the BMIS system that we're using to manage our policies and procedures. You'll be aware that BMIS is the Services Business Management Information System. One of the service's longer-term strategic themes is to make technology work for us. And in the last 6 months or so, we've decided to move forward very much a paper-based, laborious exercise in terms of managing, maintaining and reviewing our documentation. We've moved it onto the system. As I say, a work in progress. I'm going to ask Gemma to give you a whistle-stop tour of what that looks like on the screen shortly. In terms of using BMIS, the benefits of it, Gemma will highlight the benefits in a bit to give us that overview, if you like, from a performance perspective, how many procedures are in scope, how many are overdue, etc., when you're due to fall overdue. So there's great opportunity for the service to make sure that procedures are updated, if you like, and reviewed prior to that date come in. As I say, it was a lot of paperwork exchanging hands previously, which really didn't aid efficiency. So BMIS will be a big driver in making us more efficient. And certainly it places responsibility with the owners of the documents. Previously, we had a policy officer who dealt primarily with writing out to owners to say, policy X, Y, or Z is due for renewal. Please update it and get back the documentation to me as soon as you can. Now, heads of service and document owners can just review at a glance and see exactly where their policies and procedures are in terms of their validity, if you like, and their currency. We're looking at recategorization, sorry, it's early in the week, recategorization of some of the procedures. As I said, 377 in total. It is a significant number. Our quite a blunt approach previously is that every procedure should be reviewed after 3 years. We've looked at that. We feel there's a need to have a more flexible review structure and time frame attached to that. For example, we've got procedures for pieces of equipment. Now, if that equipment's shelf life is 5 years, then why would we want to review the procedure that goes there after 3 years? That seems pointless. So what we've done is we've introduced yearly, 3 yearly and 5 yearly reviews, dependent on the procedure and the policy we're referring to. For example, another one that we're looking at the moment, social media, is changing almost on a month-by-month basis, and something that we really need to keep a close eye on. So they are the extremes, if you like. So rather than everything being tested every 3 years, we're going to try and spread it out a bit, if you like, and have a more appropriate time frame, if you like, in terms of reviewing these documents. Should they be a procedure? As I say, 377 in total. We're looking at removing quite a number of those and just making them guidance notes. I think they were deemed to be procedures because at the time we only had policies and procedures. But now we've introduced a separate section of guidance notes, which will take them out of the review cycle, if you like, because that's just what they are. They're not meant, they shouldn't have been procedures in the first place, if the truth be known. They just need to be guidance notes. So that figure of 377 will come down. And as I say, together with the reviews, the revised review timetable that will allow us to keep on top of what will be a fewer number of documents, if you like. So without any further ado, that's pretty much, as I say, it is a work in progress. So these numbers that you're about to see will change on a week by week basis. But if I can ask Gemma just to give us a 5-minute overview, and then I'll be more than happy to take any questions, unless there are any questions at this moment in time, Chair.
Okay, you've got your hand raised. Do you want to ask a question now or wait till after?
Happy to wait till after, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
I'm just going to share my screen, hopefully, so you'll be able to see. Okay, so this is our Service Policies and Procedures dashboard, as we've got it currently set up on BMIS. You can see it's a bit small on the screen really. Up here was last updated on the 30th of January, and someone from our lovely SP&C team takes the detail from the spreadsheet sitting in the background and feeds this through to update it weekly. So I can make this up a little bit. If we go down, you can see the main feature on the page is the nice graph, and it's split into green and the red, as usual, red and the green. And you can see the green are procedures that are within date, so not over review. We've got amber are the ones that are currently under review, and then the red are the ones that are fallen out of their review cycle. Okay, so just to give you a little bit of a comparison, let me see what other green. I can show you very quickly a comparison from the previous version. Does that come up? Okay, so this is from October last year. We did at the time just have the red and green, but you can see that the graph, in its simplest terms, is much wider. So we've been working towards getting the oldest ones through a review or removed, depending on what's relevant. And we've updated things. You can see as well the figures on the top. That time there were 168 in date and 168 overdue. So things have improved a lot just in the last few months, just working through this. So if I just go back to my previous one. Okay, so this is the lined one again, as it is now. At the top, we've got some different drop downs we can use to filter the information that comes on there. So we can do it by document type if you wanted. So as Andrew was talking about earlier on, the A&Es are the appliance and equipment notes. So these are the ones that are mostly based on just pieces of equipment. I don't know if I'm boiling it down too simply to say it's how to use them, but that's why we were saying that there's not really any need for a short review on these. You can see that they've got 76 of them are in date and 40 need review. At the moment, for some reason, there's a bit of a glitch here where it says under review there. That's pulling through the figure for the entirety of all the procedures. I'm not sure why it's not filtering, but we can sort that out. Okay, so you can see we can filter them in lots of different ways. And I'll go back. There we go. We've also then got some different screens at the top that you can go, that any heads of service or document authors or owners can go through. So you can pull it up by department. And then for each of these, you can right click, you can go into details and it brings up a list. So you can see how useful it is for document owners to be able to keep track of what's in and out of date, which ones need work. They can export this to Excel and do whatever they want to with the information. You've got document type overview screen. So this is split into the types of documents. So appliance and equipment notes. You can see the IT ones, fire control, ops. The OPs are the operational procedures for the whole service. You've got a screen of the whole document list, which again you can filter down in lots of different ways, by date, Review date is a wildcard search title. So if you're a head of department and you know you've got something on defibrillators and you can't remember what number it is, type it in there and it'll pull them up for you. And then at the end, then we've got Welsh, a list of Welsh language translations. It's been separated out from the rest so that the counts don't double count things. It is a Welsh and an English version. I go back to the start. Hopefully that's given you a bit of a whistle-stop tour of the system and how useful it is to document owners to be able to monitor and then take action independently of any sort of policy management officer or anything like that.
Yeah, and it's worth pointing out the 109 overdue there. That was a figure when we first uploaded the documents on there, gave us cause for concern. As I say, it's a work in progress. A number of those, they'll either be obsolete or they'll either move to a 5-year cycle because they are attached to pieces of equipment, or they become guidance notes anyway. So that 109 will reduce quite significantly from that figure. Okay.
Kate, you wanted to ask a question?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to everyone that's been working on this. Really important piece of work to understand where you are and to support good governance as well, to see where things are. So firstly, thank you. Word of caution, I understand what you're saying about, the 377 coming down by changing from procedures to guidance. Guidance is still extremely important, so I would suggest that you are also tracking where guidance is at, and whether you use this system, but just have it under a separate heading. Obviously up to you, but really important that guidance is kept up to date. And the other thing to note, I wondered what the narrative. Is there somewhere where there's a short narrative against some of those overdue policies? So, noting that currently it says health and safety, our people, ICT, all overdue. There may be good reason for that, but it would be useful for good governance to understand that narrative, or to know that narrative is somewhere on the system. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Carr. If I can come back to that last point, certainly we have taken printouts of the table, as you saw there, and at heads of service we have spoken about the reasons for it. So whilst there may not be a column there to actually add the narrative, we have scrutinised each other's procedures just to ensure the reason why there is a delay. There's invariably good reason. Change in legislation occurring within the next 2 to 3 months, so we'll hold to see what the outcome of that is, for example. But yes, you make an absolutely valid point.
Has COVID played a part in a bit of a lag?
It has. We've been wanting to do this for some time. We've been looking to make as best use of the BMIS system as possible. So once we've been managing our policies and procedures on a pretty much manual basis, it was always the intention to get it on to BMIS. But I think COVID has changed our focus significantly, as it did in other organisations as well. So it's been our intention to do this for some time. As I say, we're probably about 50 to 75% where we want to be here. Once we get that 109 figure down to where it needs to be, then we start reaping the benefits of having it on BMIS. But yes, it has delayed us by some time due to our focus being elsewhere, really.
Okay. Any other questions?
Chair, if I could ask, it's a specific one. Just looking through some of the reports there, it's on page 31. There's a item which is overdue since 2016.
Yeah.
Perhaps if you'd like to comment on that. While you're just checking that, I think the BMIS system is incredibly impressive. There's the important link, I think, is when policies, procedures and guidance is updated, to be properly inputted, and there's the onus then presumably is on the department heads to make sure that work is done and it's updated. What is the duty then of the authority in considering those policies? Do they have to be formally endorsed from time to time, or is it something that is delegated to officers?
Yes, I think, yeah, the way you describe it is accurate. I mean, in terms of reviewing our policies and procedures, we've got very strong links with our representative bodies, and if there are minor changes to be made to the policies, we'll make them at officer level. If there are more significant changes, we will take them to the representative bodies, and sometimes taken into HR inequalities as well for a decision to be made. Mm. So there's such a variety of policies and procedures. Some are, if I can give an example, certainly in HR, there's a procedure as to how to undertake out various interviews, exit interviews, recruitment interviews, etc., etc. That will be dealt with at officer level. We also have disciplinary procedures, etc., which we would put out, and we only recently, in the last 6 months, put out to our legal advisors to ensure that we are compliant there. So it depends really on the nature of the procedure. Some are more, dare I say, some are more important than others, some carry greater risk than others, and we'll deal with them accordingly. Okay. Can I just try and track where this 2016 went?
Andrew, I'll help you out there. It's one of mine.
Would you?
Yes. So the one that's overdue since 2016 is the performance objectives and complaints procedure. Yeah. So there's a number of times that we've gone through a reiteration of that procedure and almost landed it, and then there's been influences coming in, so we've had to review it again. And obviously, with our the current situation that we're experiencing at the moment, what we don't want to do is to bring in a new and updated complaints procedure, which again that we'll need to review depending on the outcome of the current reviews. So I'm afraid that one will stay out of date for a little period. We have worked on it intermittently between times, with guidance from the Ombudsman and different things coming out, but we haven't actually landed it again as a procedure. My expectation is by the end of 2023, hopefully following the outcome of the cultural review, we will have tidied that up and we will have reissued a more appropriate and standard to work to.
Right. It sounds like quite a big area. Is there any potential perhaps in breaking that down into smaller policies, or at least then you're able to, complete that process and concentrate on the area where the delay is?
Yes, yeah. So it's initially it was a performance and complaints procedure. So we're going to actually hone that down to the complaints procedure, right, because our performance objectives are dealt with various other business processes and things. So that is one of the things that we will do, and it will be specifically a complaints procedure. Okay.
Right.
Okay. Yes, and that's the actual procedure that is done as 2016 said at the moment.
Yes, it is, Andrew.
Yes, that is the one, performance objectives and complaints procedure. Yeah. Okay. So there's still an element of cleanse in here. There are some procedures that are probably sat on the system still that probably have no relevance in 2023. So we'll be looking to cleanse those as well.
Okay. No other questions? Okay. We're asked to note the information in the report. Thank you both very much indeed. Very comprehensive.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Cheers. Okay. Item 7 is scrutiny of departmental risks.
Oh, actually, Wayne Thomas is going to deliver that.
Passing the button. Okay. All right.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for inviting me in as well. Hopefully, this report is quite a straightforward one for everyone's information, really. And again, it's a departmental risk report. I know, not to be confused with strategic risks. So the departmental risks, obviously, there are a mechanism of recording risks that sit at that departmental level, but they're not quite deemed eligible to be at strategic level risk. And obviously, they're not also covered by our improvement objectives. So it's just another mechanism as a service where it gives departmental heads and service another mechanism to raise potential risks. to have them recorded, and obviously then to have quarterly mitigation and updates put in as well. So the planning officers meet with the heads of service every 6 weeks, and what they discuss there is obviously the performance against the current risks. They discuss whether any of the risks at this level need to be escalated to strategic level. So again, anything that starts to go from a departmental issue to a service issue, that discussion happens every 6 weeks, which is again the mechanism we have. And we discuss whether any new risks are added. So it's anything really that has any risk of falling through the cracks at departmental level. So again, it's just that extra mechanism of scrutiny we've put in as a service. In the report you have in front of you, there's 31 risks there. They tend to be owned predominantly by your departmental heads, your heads of service. And again, at the latest count, you have 5 of them that are red at that level, 12 that are amber, 12 that are green, and 2 that are not yet classified. Again, with the scoring, we do take into account that the scoring is that departmental level scoring. So some of them do score higher than strategic level risks, but the context of the scoring does come in terms of, you know, how it impacts a department more than service wide. And again, yeah, I think the main thing there as well is into the last quarter, you'll see that 4 new ones have been added. So again, I hope that gives some assurance that this is a live process. One has been closed, and then if you look at the table after that, then you have every owner giving a quarterly update on what they've done, how they've scored it, and it shows their direction of travel. Is that risk staying as it is? Is it going up or is it going down? So for yourselves, it's just that mechanism of these things that we do have at departmental level, that if they're not kept a close eye on, that may find themselves escalating up to strategic level and the way the service operates. So I don't have much else to say. I hope the report is quite straightforward in terms of what it shows. So I'm happy to pass it on to any questions at that point.
Okay, anybody any questions? Anyone online got any questions? Kate?
I just wondered, Chair, as a newish member still, when was the last time the organisational approach to risk and risk appetite was looked at? How long have we been doing it this way for?
We've departmental risks, I believe, were introduced a few years back. They've been reviewed by the Scrutiny group. The strategic risk register we've had running for over a decade, and the process that we use for that has been fine-tuned over that period. We do try to make sure that we stay with current practice with regards to reviewing and recording risks. And I do remember about 6 years ago, we reviewed our risk scoring mechanism because we were having everything clustered together. So we then modified the way that we approached the scoring mechanism so that we could truly identify which were the high risks and the medium risks. So it's a process that we've been going through for decades, and we do follow industry and business best practice as we do it.
We'll say as well, Sarah, we are in addition to that as well, obviously our BMIS system that you saw there as well, a big step change was obviously having everything recorded there for increased visibility. We are audited, so TIAA, the internal auditors, so the risk register is something that does go through that audit on an annual basis. So again, that fine tuning every year based on, you know, the audit itself, conversations with risk owners, scoring rationale, and then the recommendations. Those papers are also put in front of the Fire and Rescue Authority as well. So that annual scrutiny is really useful for us as well, just to keep refining the process.
Okay. Okay, all right, so no other questions. Okay, we're recommended to note the highlighted points raised and all the risks, and then just quarter to updates. Happy with that?
Yeah. Okay. Chair, could I ask if Gemma could be released?
Yeah, sure, of course. Yeah, no problem at all.
Thank you.
I'm sure the word release this is
Please release me.
Back into the wild.
Be careful out there. Okay, thank you very much. Cheers. Item 8 is the FCC economic and social value of the UK via services. Chris.
Morning, Chair.
That's a bit of a mouthful, actually, isn't it?
It is, yeah. I'm not going to try and repeat that too often through this now. Yeah, morning, Chair, morning, members, and thank you for your time this morning. So, yeah, my name is Chris Hadfield. I'm a temporary area manager for risk reduction, which means I'm responsible for business fire safety and community safety. So I'm here this morning really to introduce you to a piece of National Fire Chiefs Council project, research project work that's for the first time has examined the way in which we can quantify the values that we make to our society, communities, and the UK economy. The report you've got in front of you and the appendix is really represents for the first time that our sector has a definitive statement on the contribution that we make to society. This is quite a groundbreaking piece of work, and I think this morning what I'll do, I'll break it down into 3 areas just quickly. So I'll give you some background to the research itself. I'll touch on some of the key findings, and then we'll look at the next phase of research. The background, this piece of work at the moment is focused on English services. It's a collaboration between NFCC and Nottingham University, which has been led by ACFO Dan Quinn of Shropshire. And it started phase 1 back in 2019. So the phase 1 report you'll have as part of your appendix. It's quite a chunky document, and there's quite a lot of methodology statements in there, which I'm not going to touch on this morning. That's for your own personal viewing. What's important about this document is not intended to replace or compete with any previous work that's been done in terms of the cost of fire. And it really should be looked at as a baseline and a journey for which this can be developed. The future work that this group are looking at in phase 2 and phase 3 is the potential of creating software that allow our services and other services to really examine our own activities. So really explore how we can, what value we bring to our communities, but also it allow us to bring some planning into our CRMP activities. So there's a lot really on the horizon for this. So in terms of its key findings, the project used just over 137,000 incident data groups over a 3-year period in England. The key part of this was assessed to what happens to the lives and property damage when us as fire service responds compared to the likely outcomes and if we didn't respond. So it also considers the value of prevention and protection. So that's our business fire safety and community work. So if you look through the report, there's 3 key areas it picks up on. And one is the economic and social value of emergency response to fire, the emergency response to non-related fire incidents, and protection and prevention. So when they applied it to 137,000 incidents, the value saved property for fire service intervention was just over £4 billion. And when they did exactly the same research on 137,000 incidents for lives saved, that came in just over £5 billion. When you look at the investment, so how much money fire services spend per pound to what the return is, when you look at the prevention element, they've identified that for home safety, every pound spent in investment, there's a return on £2.67 for home safety. There was a return from £1 invested into fire safety audits, that's the business fire safety. There's a return of £4.15. And then things like fire setting interventions, for every pound spent, there's a £3.30 obviously recurrence on that, yeah. So you can probably see from this investment, the first time this is probably we've ever seen this sort of value attached to it. So the next stage of research is looking at phase 2, and this is how we can apply those calculations to Northern Ireland, Scotland, and here in Wales. And this will result in the ability to calculate the values over the FRS in the entire UK, which will give us the first baseline data for the whole UK, and in particular here in South Wales. We've taken the step through the All Wales CRR group, Community Risk Group, to start looking at some of that data and seeing if we can overlay that data into service now before, rather than waiting for phase 2 of the project. The final phase of this research then is looking at how they can explore more data sets in terms of incidents. So things like wildfire at the moment is not part of their research, but something which we'll be quite keen on moving forward. So I guess really to quickly conclude, you'll probably agree that this is really exciting for us as a service in the UK. It's the first time we're going to see a definitive and robust statement on our contributions, and it also has the potential to initiate a wider discussion on our value of FRS activities. So, like I said, in the forthcoming phases of the project, I think the ability to have a software package for each service to be able to calculate that with accuracy would be really helpful for us in terms of how we can form part of our strategic and financial planning for CRMP activities. Happy to kind of rattle there. Happy to take some questions.
Okay, any questions? Dan, you've just indicated.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It was a really interesting report. Again, as I said, it had a lot of methodology in it. I think my main concern is that, again, obviously, I do appreciate it's not the only way we measure the impact we have, but when we look at members of the public, I think it comes a bit clinical. So that's my only concern, and particularly at the moment on how we potentially measure fires in residential flats. I don't think the methodology is very useful on that, because it can either obviously if it's done in a certain way, it could estimate the financial costs we have, or massively underestimate it. So I hope over time these little things do improve the model. I do appreciate, obviously, it is, groundbreaking work, and it is obviously a very early stage, but I think if we do communicate this with the public, I think we need to do in a more, obviously, quick, summarised way, which is a bit less clinical, because I think it can put people off if you're just putting it down to just costs or figures.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. I've been in touch with the group because I was quite curious about the methodology and the mathematics sat behind it and the algorithms, and it is quite challenging for us because there's a lot of data that doesn't sit there. So there's been a lot of assumptions on a very conservative basis and a lot of professional judgment on this. But they've reassured us that as time goes on, that'll become more accurate. But it's only half the story. You're absolutely right. It's just a financial picture.
Okay, all right, Dan. Okay, Kate.
Yeah, I'd agree with what Councillor Norton is saying there. I think the additional challenge that you have, it's fantastic that stuff's been done collaboratively, both sides of the border. That obviously brings benefit. However, how you align with approaches in Wales and definition, we've got specific definitions here around early intervention and prevention designed to support this kind of activity. So it's just thinking about some of that as well, and maybe actually in thinking about that actually addresses some of the stuff that Councillor Norton's talking about. Again, happy to kind of pick up offline with any thoughts around it, some useful stuff, but also some bits that I don't know, it just isn't quite sitting right for me at the moment, but I do recognise it as a really valuable piece of work.
Okay, all right, Trevor.
Yeah, on page 52, Chair, item 2.7, when applied to the 137-245 fire incidents which occurred in England over the 3-year period, have we got anything on the Welsh, or is that combined, that English and Welsh?
No, the report that's sat in front of you at the moment this is very English. There's no data set in this report at the moment for Wales. That's the next stage for us, is to look at how that overlays with in Wales, Northern Ireland and Scotland. So this is very English data centric at the moment.
So of other areas, Northern Ireland, Scotland, are they doing the same? And then we can compare all other parts of the UK?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So in phase 2, that's exactly what the research group are going to be doing. So they're going to be taking out those 3 levels of data and using it in exactly the same manner.
That's lovely. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, all right. Any questions? No, it's it's brilliant report. Oh, sorry, Dan.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Sorry if I missed this in the report. When I was talking about house prices, for one thing, hopefully this gets resolved as it becomes more detailed in the future, is obviously it keeps talking about average house prices. And that's obviously Greater Manchester and how they use that as a baseline. But obviously in South Wales Authority, even in our area, house prices will vary very differently in Cardiff as an average, even though in Cardiff house prices vary differently within the city to areas like Merthyr. So I'm thinking, obviously, will that be taken into account? Because if you're looking on a per financial process, preventing a fire in an area like Lisvane would be financially potentially greater value than preventing a fire in another area, which obviously is not what we should be looking at. But what I'm asking is it just could be a general average figure, or will it be going into more details on where fires are prevented and the total cost?
Yeah, I think I did speak to them about this, and their plan is at the moment to keep a raw data set, which is what you've got in front of you now, to make it more live, because you're absolutely right. The differences across the country with house prices is completely different, and it's fluctuating quite rapidly as well. So that's one of the economic data sets they'll need to keep live, and that's where they're going to tie it into the software. That's their plan.
Thank you very much for this. It's very detailed. It's very interesting to read, actually. Probably long overdue, but like anything, it's going to get better over time. I look forward to seeing the next one. It's good. Thank you very much. Cheers. Okay, we all looked at?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, next is agenda item number 9, which is the budget consultation for 23-24. Got down treasurer. Oh, you've got no name, Chris. So, yeah.
Man with no name.
Man with no name. So yeah. Over to Chris Barton.
I promise you, members, this is a very short presentation that I'm going to provide. This item really was to feed back the budget consultation responses to the scrutiny group, and I appreciate it's down on the information part of the agenda. But of course, that doesn't prevent the group feeding back to the Fire Authority next Monday when it's due to take its budget decision. Either by myself, I'm sure the chair would feed back with each of the group, or indeed individual members can anyway if they're at the Fire Authority, of course. So in that respect, the consideration of this item is both for information and for any feedback, really. What I thought I would just do is provide members with a sort of information and context presentation, just to remind members where we've come from in the budget process. And I think it's against that background that perhaps some of the discussion today might take place. In order to ensure we have a complete position here, Councillor Hughes, I think, brought to our attention the fact that back in December 2022, the Fire Authority received a letter from all council leaders, mainly addressing the press coverage around the culture issues that were covered in the press around that time. But they did, at the bottom of that letter, reference the budget process as well. So for completeness sake, what I've just done is drawn this to members' attention here. There was a paragraph in the letter which actually, as you can read on the screen there, expressed concerns from members of all 10 authorities regarding the budget decision by the Fire Authority, and particularly the level of the proposed increase. So I just thought it was important for members to be aware of that paragraph within that letter as well. We then, subsequent to that, received a letter from the 5 Gwent authorities, which was included in your agenda pack, essentially raising the same sort of concern really around the size of the budget increase, but also making an offer regarding meeting with either the scrutiny committee or the service to assist us in any way they could with reconsideration of that proposed increase. It's probably worthwhile at that point mentioning that letter to remind members that we have a budget consultation process running with the Fire Authority since the December meeting of the Fire Authority that considered the consultation budget. And since October, we've actually been meeting with all the constituent authorities as well. So we have been sharing this information about the challenges which the Fire Authority is facing, some of the work we've been doing, and also the potential size of the budget increase that's being proposed as well. We've met with 7 of the 10, I believe, to date. It's rather unfortunate that the 3 we haven't met are the 3 largest authorities. So I believe that's Rhondda and Taff, Newport and Cardiff at this moment in time. Having said that, I think that has been largely down to an inability to actually get diaries together to actually find mutually convenient to meet those authorities. It's not been down to a lack of trying, if you like, to actually share the information. The other thing that has been going on as well in terms of consultation is I have been keeping the 10 constituent authority finance directors up to date with the decision making as it's gone along as well, so they're fully sighted on what's going on in respect to the budget process. Just in terms of a quick kind of reminder of the numbers, so this is a summary of where we've got to really from the start of the budget process through to where we are currently and the recommendation to Fire Authority on Monday. We started off with a medium-term financial strategy position, which indicated a budget of 87.7 million. For the context of that, our current year budget is just over 79 million, so it's quite a substantial increase in budget, obviously being driven by cost of living and pay particularly. So when we started the budget process, we were looking at a 10.62% increase in budget. We then went away and did some work, and indeed we reported back to the Scrutiny Committee, I think, some of this work earlier in the year around the work we were doing to identify savings and reductions in the budget. And we managed to take out about £2 million worth of that pressure through that process. And that brought us to a position where we were around 8.2% in terms of a budget increase. Rather unhelpfully, at the very end of the budget process, in fact, after we took the decision on the report to Fire Authority in December, we had a letter from the Minister, the Deputy Minister, indicating that there were going to be some changes to fire funding. The first was to cut the FireLink grant, which we were previously receiving, and that FireLink grant underpins the emergency services communications network that we run. So that was £600,000, and that was just a straight cut. There was no kind of decision making around it other than simply they weren't going to provide that funding to fire authorities in Wales any longer. That caused the 8.2% to immediately go up to just under 9%. And the second thing which was coming along but not yet decided was the transfer of what is known as a SCAPE grant. And that transfer was to take that grant off fire authorities and transfer it to the local authority funding settlement. That was about £3 million for South Wales Fire Authority, and that then increased that 9% up to about 12.7%. Okay, I would stress that last decision is cost neutral. It's money taken off the fire authority and handed straight to the local authorities, which they will then give back to the fire authority through an increased fire contributions budget. So it's a kind of cost neutral exercise, that last one. So the headline, which is on the budget papers that are going to Fire Authority on Monday, is a 12.7% increase. The reality is it's more like a 9% increase if you exclude that last item. So that's the position we're at. And in terms of like-for-like funding, if you exclude the FireLink cut, it's about 8.2%. Is sort of where we are as a budget decision. Now, bear with me, members, while I try and get my screen to turn over. So, in terms of context, just to put some context on this, the current year, 22-23, council resources increased by around 10% from Welsh Government. The Fire Authority asked for 2.29% increase in its budget in the current year. And currently, the Fire Authority is facing a likely budget overspend. So the FAPM committee has been considering our budget monitoring for the year that's currently in question. The budget increase was projected at over £1 million. We believe that's now coming down as a result of our management of it. Plus, we've had some windfalls around rate refunds coming through, so we'll be reporting a lesser position than that as we go through the remainder of this year, hopefully. And in terms of 23-24, just to bring members up to speed to where we currently are, council resources will increase from Welsh Government by around 7.9% for next year. Plus, of course, council tax. We don't know what's happening with council tax. We're not party to that decision at this moment in time. And the Fire Authority, on a like-for-like basis, would be requesting 8.2%. we know the headline is going to be 12.7, but on a like-for-like basis, it's about 8.2. I suppose, so what I was left with in response to the questions posed in the two letters that we received was, well, what might the fire authority do in respect of the ask? What could we do to actually look at potentially bringing that figure down? And I think that needs to be viewed in terms of the work that's already been put in, but also the things which we still have a degree of uncertainty on. And they fall into two headings, really. Operational service changes, which is hinted at in the Gwent leader's letter, which is, well, why don't you change the kind of nature of the services you undertake? And the other one is a financial solution. You know, could we do anything financially to simply solve the problem? In terms of the first one, the aim of the fire authority always has been to ensure that we provide two aspects of the operational service. The one is response, clearly dealing with incidents as they arrive, and the other is risk reduction, to actually try and minimise the response, the need to respond. And obviously, if you change either of those things, it has the potential for risk to increase, and it has the potential for cost to increase. So, you know, we haven't shied away from that in the past. We did a fire cover review a number of years ago now, and we made some changes to the service provision in that respect. But all of those decisions have to be taken against a context of, you know, what is going to happen to risk if you change those type of services. The other challenge around that, of course, is we're now in February, and if we were going to make any changes like that, then there's a limited time to implement them and a limited time to secure savings from them for next year now. And the other aspect to it is we provide few, if any, discretionary services. Most of what we do is of a statutory nature. We can't choose not to respond to fire incidents or flooding incidents now, things like that. So unlike some of the other public bodies where there are discretionary services, we have limited room for manoeuvre in respect to the services we provide. The other side of that equation then is the financial solution. So what, if anything, could we do around that? And obviously, one of the things we could do is look to set a lower budget and then somehow use our financial resources to facilitate that. What I would say in that respect is some of the planned budget work we've already done commits reserves to reduce ongoing costs. So the work that we've done over the last few years has been trying to use our reserves to apply them to actually ensure that our budget doesn't rise by as much as it otherwise would. And if we use those reserves to actually just simply suppress the budget, we then run out of those reserves quicker and are unable to use them in that way. So that's always a balance as to how you use those reserves. The other couple of challenges that still exist, and I think members need to be well aware of, is that clearly we still have an uncertainty over the uniformed staff pay. Members will be well aware that the FBU were successful in their ballot for strike action recently. To put it in context, we currently have an assumption in our budget that there will be a 10% increase in pay over the 2 financial years. That's this year and next year. We already are aware that there's an offer, an informal offer, I think I'd probably describe it as, from London Fire Brigade to the employees in London, which is 11% over 2 years. So already we're seeing offers emerging within the fire community that exceed the provision that we've got in our budget. So there is a possibility that pay will be higher than the budget provision we already have in. So I think that sits as a risk over the budget that you're setting, even at the levels that we're discussing. The other aspect of that, of course, is if industrial action does go ahead, is that any costs of industrial action are unbudgeted. Now, we've put as a service ourselves in a better position going forward because we've started our auxiliary firefighter service up, and we are planning to ensure that we have resources internally to cope with industrial action. But that's not the limit of it. We still believe we will need a military aspect to that response to actually bolster that response. Difficult to know what the cost is yet because we don't know whether A, it's going ahead, and B, what that industrial action will look like. To put it in context, the last time industrial action occurred, which was just before I started with you as a treasurer, we were looking at costs of industrial action of around £1.5 million. Now, we don't think it's going to be of that order. Hopefully it won't be protracted if it happens, and we think that we would be able to keep costs down because of the work we put in around the auxiliary. But it is a figure that we need to be aware of. We will need to fund that if and when it comes. The other aspect in terms of risk as well is the fact that we are aware that the fire advisor to Welsh Government has made certain recommendations around our method of operation, particularly in respect of our shift patterns and the way that impacts on our staff and their resilience. The fire advisor has a view about changes that need to be made. I think we have a view from a service about what changes should and shouldn't be made in that respect. But as that comes to fruition, there could be costs associated with that as well. So we need to be cognizant of that as well. And lastly on that list in terms of risk is the fact that we know we've got to undertake the culture review. We don't know what the cost of that is yet. I mean, we believe we can accommodate, hopefully from reserves, that cost. But also we obviously don't know what the findings are, and there could be costs associated with those findings as well. So for instance, there might be a need to train staff as a simple suggestion in terms of response to that, but there could be wider issues arising from that review. I mean, fingers crossed, touch wood, you know, hopefully they will be limited and we will end up in a reasonably good place, but it's an unknown. So I think in terms of a financial solution which involves setting a lower budget purely on the basis of being able to finance that in the short term, I think I would counter that with a number of those risks and challenges which are as yet uncertain, and therefore they would substantially increase the budget risk if we were to go down that route. So I'm going to take the presentation off the screen at that point, Chair, and really open to members. I'm sorry if that sounds like quite a kind of defensive position statement from me. It's not intended to be defensive. It's intended to be a sort of fairly factual explanation of where we are. And obviously we're all, including councils, facing a significant cost of living crisis, and that's driving pay, which is the main cost of public services that we're facing. So over to members, Chair.
Okay, Dan, you've got your hand raised.
Yeah, well, thank you, Chris. You know, you in your presentation, you covered most of the points I wanted to ask about. My main concern at the moment, I appreciate, obviously, it's the first year of Scrutiny Group, and Welsh and UK governments have been pushing later and later with the budget, so it makes it harder for us to plan and get member engagement. But I think it'd be useful for next year for us to meet in early January, if there has been any changes, so members can have longer to scrutinise and suggest potentially changes for any budget, because obviously you know, changes can come now later in the year, so even as obviously they've changed from December to now. My other issue is, even though I do think that there's nothing we can realistically do now for this year, I think we do need to take for authorities or 10 authorities views into account on how we look at the budget potentially for next year and how we engage with them. One last final question is, obviously, hopefully firefighters do get a good pay settlement and one they're happy with, will prevent strike action. But if obviously the settlement is less over the next 2 years than we budgeted for, but less than the 10% over the next 10% per year over the next 2 years, would there be any ways potentially to then, if it is lower, rebate for 10 local authorities for financial difference rather than it going to our general reserves?
I would, Joe, never sort of seek to say that we will simply rest on our laurels. I mean, I don't think we will end up in a situation where pay is less than we provided for. But clearly, if anything substantial changes in respect of our budgeting, which released resources or indicated we were significantly over provided, then we would look to feed that back to the local authorities. And indeed, Councillor Norton, the kind of 2.29% we set for the current financial year had an element of that in it. We did identify the fact that we believe from the previous year we were over provided in pay, and that's why we were able to go in at such a low figure. So I think, you know, there's a kind of history of that. So we have been quite explicit, I think, in our budget reports over the years that we try whatever we can to take account of the resources that are available to local authorities every year, and also what our budget is doing from year to year as well. what I haven't set out there is kind of a number of things that are driving our reserve strategy, and I think it's, you know, for members to be aware, we do maintain reserves. Obviously, one of those reserves is our general balance, is to try and balance off expenditure, which is unexpected. So, for instance, like the strike action money I mentioned, to try and ensure we don't go back to the constituent authorities in year to ask for more money. But the other thing is we've got a number of things that we're trying to achieve in terms of reserves, hopefully to avoid those hitting the revenue budget. So what I've mentioned is we are trying to set up an equipment reserve to actually fund major items of equipment, so that doesn't hit the revenue budget in lumps each year and cause sort of wide variations in the budget. The other aspects that we got in there as well, which we're very aware of, which we're doing work on, is we're trying to do the right thing around decarbonisation. So we're trying to invest in our fleet and premises to try and ensure that we reduce our carbon footprint of the service. And the other emerging issue which we're aware of, which there's work ongoing on, is issues around our equality and diversity of our workforce. Because one of the things we are aware of is that most of our premises are sort of configured for a service that was developed a number of years ago. So they tend to be geared to around an all-male workforce. And as we are developing our female workforce, clearly there will need to be changes to our stations, for the way they function. Now, clearly, we've done some work around that already to try and facilitate that happening. But I think we are all aware that a number of our stations need more work in that respect to try and ensure that they are fit and proper places for us to work in that way. So that's an important issue as well. And both of those things that I've mentioned, in fact, all three of the things that I've mentioned, run into millions of pounds. You know, they're not small ticket items. So it's important to recognise that part of the reason for our reserve strategy and our change management reserve is to try and address those issues.
Okay, thank you. Cheers. Trevor?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm in agreement with Dan in regards to looking at the budget, you know, a little bit earlier so we can scrutinise it. The other thing I'd like, if possible, is to get the financial status, say 6 months into the year, 6 or 7 months into the year, to see how we're progressing or not progressing in regards to keeping to the budget, if that's possible, Chair.
Sorry, Chair, I did, my mistake. I meant to cover off Dan's point around the budget. Yes, Councillor Norton and Councillor Watkins, what I think we'd like to do is to try and get Scrutiny involved at an earlier stage, so that there's an opportunity to sort of feed into the early stage of the budget. And Councillor Watkins, the FAPM committee does regular budget monitoring. So if I'm sure you've probably got access to their reports. If not, they're on the website. But yes, there will be budget monitoring statements in those. Try and do them on broadly a quarterly basis. So the last one I think was September, October time. There'll be another one due now shortly. As I mentioned, there was an indication of an overspend. We knew that was coming because of the pay issue. We knew that the pay awards that we are likely to be paying for the current year are going to be in excess of that budget. I think that's common across all public sector bodies at the moment. So I'm sure your own authority will be saying the same thing to you in respect of the budget monitoring there as well.
Yeah. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Chair.
That's okay. Kate?
Thank you, Chair. You put forward a good and strong case. I do think it has the potential to be seen as defensive, and it's important, isn't it, that we are seeing it as a whole public sector and the pressures that everybody is facing. While it looks like a percentage increase, we are having to take 23 million from Cardiff Council's budget, and that's faced by all local authorities of Wales, despite Welsh Government's best efforts to protect. So I think it is seeing it, isn't it, as where South Wales Fire and Rescue does a really important job around prevention as well as responding to incidents and how we maintain and support that. So I do think the sooner that we can be looking collaboratively around what's best done where and you know, how we're able to deliver for the public and protect these crucial services as a whole public sector. Keeping those conversations going is key, which leads me on. I think I just want to be sure when we're thinking about the culture review, when we're thinking about equality and diversity, we are not seeing it through the lens of an additional expense, but an investment, and one that we cannot afford to not do, that it will save us more in the long term. And so, you know, and again, you know, if you are looking at expensive things being implemented, changes to station, that engagement, that involvement and dialogue to be sure it is what people want and need versus something we think we've got to do to tick a box, so that, you know, it has to be really meaningful. It has to be sure it's what people need to do their jobs well and to feel safe and, you know, and for well-being at work. And that comes through having that conversation and dialogue. And so please, just a huge plea that we see this culture review as really important and informative to that, and not a burden or an expense. Thank you.
I would entirely agree, Councillor Carr, 100%.
Okay, all right. Any questions in the room? No, okay. Can I just pick up on something? I got an interest in this from day one. The £600,000 taken by Welsh Government for EMS. What was the rationale?
It's an interesting one, this. So the £600,000 was a contribution to the overall cost of running the communications network. The communications network is actually coming to its end because there is a new project taking place on a national basis for a new emergency services network. And it was the intention that the new project would actually save money, but the indications are that the cost of that new network is actually going up, not down.
And it won't come into place till 2030.
And it is being delayed, and we don't know when it's arriving in Wales properly anyway. When the Deputy Minister wrote to the authority, the justification given was that the Welsh Government don't, as a matter of course, fund operational equipment, and therefore they've just stopped funding it. There is no rationale as to why that cost has gone away. It hasn't gone away, it's still there. It is just simply a cessation of funding, and it's really unhelpful that the timing of that is right at the end of the budget process. And not only that, but it wasn't signalled either. You know, if there'd been some signalling of this earlier in the process, we might have been able to kind of respond to it. But it's simply, from my perspective, looks like a grant cut in order to save money. The other aspect, I suppose, of that which worries me as well is that given that we've seen the project development of the new emergency services network being delayed and costs increasing, it also looks like the costs have now passed entirely to the fire authority, and therefore the risk has passed with it. So if those cost increases continue to occur, we will be faced with dealing with that. Whereas in the past, Welsh Government might have been helping with dealing with that challenge. So in answer to your question, there was no rationale given other than the fact that it wasn't appropriate. The Welsh Government continued to fund it and they weren't going to. So that's the end of that.
He said it's really completely out of our hands. It's a national issue.
Yeah. And
it's costing, I think, it's overall for the UK £1 million a day or something like that to keep it going.
Yeah, it's not an easy one, and we know there are challenges both operationally in that network within Wales in terms of the coverage, but also the cost as well.
So we're picking up a tab for what is a national issue.
Yeah.
Not helpful. Okay, all right. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much for that, Chris. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, next is agenda item 10, forward work programme.
Thank you, Chair. So the forward work programme at the end of your papers show that we've got 2 meetings left for the Scrutiny Group in this new fiscal year. Chair, for the 6th of March meeting, I propose that we add an item onto the forward work programme on the annual report of the work of the Scrutiny Group, because most of the other committees are reporting to the Fire Authority on the 27th of March, so I think it would be very valuable for there to be a report for this group to identify to the Fire Authority what it's done to date and then what it plans to do in April. And then we've already got a number of papers on the April forward work programme that you can see there. And I'd suggest that it's to the April meeting we would bring the future internal consultation strategy around the objectives as we were discussing earlier around the consultation. If that's agreeable to the chair of the group, I'd suggest we have those. To
All happy with that?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yep.
Thank you.
Right. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, item 11, to consider any items of business that chairperson deems urgent. No, nothing at all. I'm not going to mention rugby. Thank you all very much for attending. Safe journey home for those of you who are driving back. Be careful walking to the kitchen for you online, and speak to you all soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.